everybody, and welcome to Comic Con at Home. We are here to present our panel on making programming your superpower. And so we have three SDPL librarians, including myself, and let's introduce ourselves. I don't know who's to this side of me, if there's anyone.
I will go. Yeah.
Sure.
My name is Melissa Giffen. I'm the Youth Services Librarian over at the Scripps Miramar Ranch Library, one of the branch libraries for the SDPL, San Diego Public Library. And I have been working in libraries for a little over 5 years and been working as a Youth Services Librarian for a little over 4. And all that time has been with SDPL at different branches.
All right. Well, my name is Bijan Naruzian. Hello, everyone. How's it going? And I've been working for the libraries for 15 years now. I'm old, but I've been a youth services librarian for a little bit less than that, about 4 years. And man, it's been a journey. It's been so much fun. And I'm so excited to share so much with you guys today.
All right. I'm Vanessa, and I am the manager of the Pauline Foster Teen Center at the San Diego Central Library. And I've been a librarian for about 7 years. And I have been in management / youth services that whole time, basically, but not here. I've moved around from Texas, and I've been at SDPL for about a year now. So what we are here to talk to you about is what we think makes programming great. We all work with different age groups, we have different communities, we have different styles, and we thought our experience might be useful for all of you. So I guess let's start off with what your background is in terms of programming. Who do you program for typically? And what are your favorite things to do for that age group? Yeah.
Well, everything. I'm kind of known as the extra guy, and by extra I mean, wow, I'm crazy, all this stuff. So number one thing I always say is find what is really good with you and go for it. Now, my main age demographic is going to be usually kids like preschoolers, elementary school, and middle school. We don't have any high schools nearby, but we have a whole lot of elementaries and middle schools. Don't ask me why that is. I don't know. But yeah, it's been really cool working with the families, and I don't know. It's quite a wild journey. Number one thing I say is find your audience, talk to the parents, they're going to give you all the material you need.
What about you, Melissa?
Good tip. Yeah, so my background is working with youth. So when I started at SDPL, I was working as a youth services librarian with the San Ysidro branch, which did not have a lot of older children in the area. Again, a lot of elementary schools nearby, but not a lot of high schools. Or even the middle school was a little bit further away. So my main demographic there was elementary and younger. Now that I've been at the Scripps Ranch Library for a couple years, my demographic has widened. So I still have everybody that I had before, all of the elementary school and younger, but I've added middle school and high school to my demographic as well. And that's pretty much it. I don't do too much in terms of adult programming anymore, not since I became a youth services librarian. So I did do a little bit of that as a library assistant.
Nice. So since I work in the teen center, my primary demographic is teens. And that's anywhere from 12 to 18. And since we have a school right upstairs, well, not right upstairs, on the 6th and 7th floors of the Central Library, we are able to really serve those kids and bring programs to them. We also have a few middle schools and high schools that are in walking distance. So we see the whole range of 12 to 18. And I know that when I plan programs, sometimes I'm really great at, planning them ahead of time. Sometimes I'm really not. So, Bijan and Melissa, would you consider yourself, when you approach programming, a plotter or a pantser? And by that, I mean, do you plot out your programs ahead of time, or do you just fly by the seat of your pants? So who wants to answer first?
I mean, I'll go. Why not?
Go for it.
Just right off the bat, I totally forgot my background. Hey, I've done, adult programming, teen programming, kids programming. So everybody's like, hey, you didn't answer the question. There you go. But as for a plotter or pantser, I'm kind of like a middle of both. I plot out the general outline of a lot of my programs, like, hey, I'm going to do this kids program on this day. I'm going to be reading this book. But then in terms of like the minutia of like the itty bitty details and stuff like that, kind of do it off the fly of my pants. It's, in my opinion, it kind of works better if I'm trying to memorize every little thing that I'm doing. It kind of sounds robotic. So you got to make it fun and most importantly, fluid, if that makes sense.
What about you, Melissa?
I would definitely consider myself closer to the plotter side of that spectrum than the pantser side of the spectrum. Although that being said, like there's always different situations that come up, and like clearly right now we're experiencing a pandemic, and so all of us have been in some ways forced into the pantser seat. But yeah, my comfort zone, at least for one-off bigger programs, is to plot them out, plan them. When it comes to regular programs that I already have on the calendar and I know that they're coming up, I can just throw random themes in as needed, and that's no big deal. But if it's a special event, then I'm going to plan it out quite a bit. And I can talk about that process a little bit if we want.
Yeah, that's a really good point, by the way, because big events, if you try to pants that, hot mess. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, especially if you don't know exactly how many people to expect and you want to be able to scale it from a number that's, moderate to very high. You have to sort of have contingency plans in place.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, the pandemic has made you more of a pantser than a plotter, a term that we've borrowed from NaNoWriMo, the National Novel Writing Month team. And because the pandemic has made me more of a plotter.
Vanessa, you should talk about your style and then as a manager, what you encourage in your staff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually encourage a lot of plotting with my staff, which is funny because I am known for throwing together programs at like the very last minute with what we have on hand. It's kind of like the Chopped of programming. Like you have this in your pantry, you have acrylic paint, you have canvas bags, you have like glitter. What are you gonna do? So kind of like throwing things together, but I like to encourage my staff to do whatever style fits them best. And for a lot of my team, that is plotting things out. I don't require like a program proposal or a list of like, hey, this is what we're gonna do here, 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 and here, at least not for like smaller scale programs. But I do ask for like, hey, so what about this? What about this? What about this? And just making sure that they have all of their bases covered. I like to make sure that I'm fostering creativity because I know I have tried and failed a lot of things in my career. And that's the best way to learn. That's the best way to encourage people to grow and innovate. And the pandemic has forced all of us to grow and to innovate. And so because of that, that's forced me into a style that I'm not normally like known for. Because I'm running the teen Instagram with Melissa, and that has been an experience because I'm like, oh, wait, no, we have to have content on these dates, and these are the things that we need to have by here, here, and here.
Yeah, it's a bit of a juggling trick, keeping those plates in the air.
Yes, for sure. But in non-pandemic times, what is your general approach to thinking up programs and thinking of things to do with your community?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have kind of a checklist I go through. So in non-pandemic times, if I have the luxury of time, I will note throughout the year, whenever the opportunity presents, like what sort of interest that I'm noticing in the kids and teens and demographic that I'm interacting with in the library. I keep a notebook, so I keep notes of anything that has been popping up a little bit more often. And then when I'm looking to sort of add things to the calendar, I start with those things, those interests that I've already noted. And so like anything that's high interest, high engagement that you are passionate about or you see a passion in the library for. Like, those are the things I always want to start with. And I'm sure you both are the same, because those are the things that there's already a built-in level of engagement for. And then once I kind of determine like, oh, I would love to have this type of program, I look at my community, I see if it exists, what form it exists in, if there's community partners, or if there's a way I can complement what's already going on, or if I'm starting a whole new thing, then I estimate my costs. I figure out whatever other investments I might need in terms of like staff buy-in, and kind of figure out what the scalability of that program is, if it only works for 20 people, if it could work for a much larger crowd, if it can grow from 20 to a much larger crowd. Then I start getting feedback and start refining that sort of process, that plan, what it looks like. And then I have a pitch that I can actually start taking to anyone that I might need to get approval or funding from and get that support on board. So that's kind of my process. But again, if it's a regular program and I already have the framework for it, I don't worry about most of that. I just throw the theme in and I just, celebrate whatever it is in the framework I already have. But if it's brand new and I want it to be a regular program, I do look at developmental appropriateness and things like that too. But that's pretty much it. After that, it's just like figure out your deadlines and your plan to promote it. And after you just look at what you created and, see what you can learn from it. As Vanessa said, like, everything that you try is an opportunity to learn from, especially the things that don't go well. So.
What about you, Bijan?
I mean, I am not as detailed as that. I'll tell you that. When it comes to me, basically the main thing that I think about is, well, one, I try to make it a point to have at least, the very least, one children's program per day. Very important for me to at least have an option for all the families out there. Now with that, diversity is very important. You want to like a different programs for different, interests and demographics and everything. And I guess the best way to describe it is look at the community, actually like understand, talk to families. Like, yeah, you might have an idea of like, oh man, a video game program might be great. Or, oh, wow, a bilingual story time might be great, all these different things. But hey, if the community that doesn't really work for them, you got to find what also works for the community and their interests and things like that. And the best way of doing that is just talking to families. As for my approach, I just look at what days are available and I hit those time slots. And it's not only diversity in terms of interest in programming, but also ages. It's very important to have programs not only for preschoolers and families, but also, different programs for elementary school kids and middle schoolers, things like that. And with that, you also have to be aware of the time constraints. If you're going to be, making programs for elementary and middle schoolers, don't do it in the morning when they're in school. Kind of important. So, kind of just basic things like that a lot of people tend to kind of overthink sometimes. And yeah, you're just going to be fine. Do programs, see if they work, and, don't be afraid to fail sometimes. You're the best learning experiences is failing.
Yeah.
So I personally like to lean into the things that I like, and I encourage my team to do the same. So I like to make things, and I like to do fun, crafty stuff. And so that tends to be my programming type. But I have a team who has a diverse array of interests and who we're able to leverage those interests and those skills into doing something that's great for each kind of corner of our community. And one of the things that we do is we do a question of the day every day when we're open, and the teens will come up, they will answer the question, they'll get a little tchotchke.
Cute.
They love
What kind of questions are we talking about here? I'm so intrigued.
So they can be anything from brain teasers, which are a huge hit, to more philosophical type questions like, hey, if you could live permanently 500 years in the future or 500 years in the past, which one would you choose? And so that sparks some discussions, and it's really fun to see that engagement. That question actually got us we had 6 or 7 people standing around the desk, like debating this topic.
That's great.
And they were like, yeah, no. They all had strong feelings about it. I was like, oh, this is kind of like a program. But
well,
we also,
fantastic. Sorry to cut you off, but I'm just saying, like, for everybody at home, take notes. That's a great way to just, create a bond and community with, your entire staff.
yes.
Yeah, and that really bridges the passive to the active. That's really wonderful.
Yeah.
And we've gotten a lot of our program ideas from that as well. So if there are teens that have like a strong interest in like the question and it's like a discussion type thing, then we can do more discussion-based programming. If it's like brain teasers and they've really liked that, we can do more puzzle box, escape room type stuff. And like that really helps us figure out who likes to do what. And we have the luxury of a mostly built-in audience because a lot of the teens from the school upstairs, E3 Civic High, they'll come down and they'll hang out in our space. And so like we walk around, we talk to them, we gauge what their interests are. If they're not coming to programs that they used to come to, we'll be like, hey, what's up? We notice that you're not coming anymore. And we try to feel out what's not working for them. So it's a balance, and it's really just getting to know our teams and building up that relationship and that trust. And it's super important that your whole team does this, at least your whole programming team, because some teams are going to respond to you very differently than they will respond to like my assistant manager or to one of our other staff members. So building that rapport is super, super important, especially for teens. So, but did anyone have anything to add to that?
I feel like I'm getting good ideas from you guys too. I'm writing them down.
Yeah, good to know. So speaking of learning things and getting ideas, what have you learned about programs during the pandemic? So I feel like we have learned so much. Melissa, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, we're constantly learning more, and so much has depended on, we've taken for granted being able to interact with our demographic in the library day in and day out. And now we're in this new situation where we have to interface with our public through social media, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but a lot of the ways in which you engage your community just aren't happening the same way right now. So we've had to try new things. We've definitely, because, obviously this was not planned for us. So we had to just kind of start throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what would stick and what people would like and what people weren't so interested in. And we've really leaned on the sort of bread and butter type of regular library programs, by which I mean like story time for younger kids and art programs, although through the virtual interface. We've been, as Vanessa said, like she and I have been doing the teen Instagram, and that was brand new. It didn't exist before this pandemic. So, we had to start completely from scratch and really figure out what we wanted it to be, and start to like try to get some teen eyes on there when we had never promoted it before. So we've been learning a lot through that process of just trying things and see how they go. I think all of us jumped in pretty early to try to create some online content, especially for some high interest things, for like Star Wars Day, May the 4th be with you, and things like that. Like we all jumped in. And a lot of our colleagues who weren't as comfortable are finally getting the opportunity to try these things and see how other people have had, their shot at it and what they've done, and they've been able to adapt that and move forward. So, as we've moved through it, we've learned more for ourselves, but also we've done a little bit of trial and error for our colleagues. And so we've helped each other along the way, if that makes sense.
And that's so important. Supporting each other has been huge. Some people might have a skill set that you don't have. So you may be comfortable in front of the camera, but you may not know anything about editing your video. And so just like looking for different ways that staff can contribute to a project is super, super important. What about you, Bijan? What have you learned from?
I mean, a whole lot. Simply because in the library system, it seems like I'm the video guy, you know, so it's coming to me. But it's important to know, first off, you know, have a plan of what you're going to be performing. That way, you kind of have a background of like, all right, if it's going to be for kids, I got to be either more fun or animated or something more presentable because they have short attention spans. Don't do a 30-minute, you know, video for you know, 5-year-old or anything like that. But also just be aware of, you know, the editing constraints of what you're doing also. If you're going to be doing something that's going to involve a bunch of editing and all this stuff, hey, maybe like scale it back a little bit, make your life easy. But yeah, I mean, editing is a major portion of it. And one thing I always say to everybody is don't be too afraid to edit a video. You can either go all crazy with your, you know, CGI and special effects and all that stuff, or it's as simple as just cutting out all the unnecessary stuff and then just putting it out there. It's okay. Nobody's going to be judging you like you're the next Leonardo DiCaprio. I can't even say his name. But it's kind of important. So I guess just check your ego at the door, have fun, and that's the most important thing. If you have fun, if you got a smiley face, people are going to forgive anything you're really doing. And yeah, I've seen a lot of success with that. Other things that are important are engagement. In particular, Facebook and a few other social media outlets have algorithms where they kind of prioritize things that get the most activity and engagement within the first like 15 to 30 minutes. So it's very important that you have posts happening at the same time on a regular rotation. That way people know to find your, you know, your posts and everything at certain times of the day. That way they can access it, like it, and share it and comment on it. When that happens, you're going to build an audience even more where it's going to be hitting everybody's news feeds. If you like post something at say like 2:15 or 2:17 p.m. and nobody was expecting it, yeah, you might get some views, but you're not going to get the huge amount of views or the opportunities to get that engagement that you usually do. So try to build a schedule and go from there, you know?
Yeah, for sure. That's been difficult. That's been a learning curve for me personally, because, you know, of the tools that we have at our disposal, some of them we are great. Some of them, you know, as libraries, we don't have like all the bells and whistles that maybe some other like companies do with like their social media management. So that's been a really interesting learning curve of like, hey, this is a good time to post. Oh, this is not a great time to post. So yes. And one of the things that I would say is just don't be afraid to look silly. And as awkward as you think you might look on the camera, other people may not read it that way. For example, I did 2 Facebook Lives, and every time, thank you, every time I pressed end, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so awkward. This is so weird. No one's gonna like that. But people responded well to those things, and they're like, oh yeah, you're fun, you're funny, and I'm like, oh, thanks. So not every, like, maybe you'll look silly sometimes, but like sometimes that's the point. We want to be fun.
It comes with experience, right? Yeah.
What I'd always say is everybody's their worst enemy when it comes to like editing or whatever. Like people are like, oh gosh, my nose is all big, or oh, I had that. I was ticking or all this stuff. I was like, nobody cares. Nobody's looking at that. Like you look great. You're fine. So
well, and especially like if you care, right? If you care about the topic, like there's something about that is more engaging, even if you're super awkward as you talk about it, you know?
Fantastic point. Yeah.
Well, so since I think we're wrapping up soon-ish, but since this is Comic-Con, what's your favorite fandom-related programs that you have done?
Well, I mean, my favorite is a very special program called Superhero Storytime with Library Man. Oh my gosh, if you guys don't know Library Man, I'm his biggest fan. Oh my gosh, he's so awesome. He has an amazing, amazing square jaw, the most handsome person I've ever seen in my life, I must say. He kind of looks like me. I don't know. But I must say,
I see the resemblance.
Yeah, just a little bit. But seriously, that's been one of my favorite things is, seeing superhero story time and like, SDPL's like mascot and superhero library man really rise, it's really cool. He battles illiteracy. Check it out. But there's been a variety of different, fandom related programming that we do at the library. And I'm sure among all libraries that celebrate so much fandom. I mean, guys, like the Star Wars Day stuff alone is amazing. Also, like the Harry Potter, things that we do. And I mean, I can go on for days, but there's so much really cool stuff out there. And I'm just amazed by it. Melissa, I know you guys do some really cool stuff at your library, right?
Yeah, we definitely do. I definitely lean into the fandom stuff because that's the stuff that I geek out about. So it's a really good opportunity to bond with all the different demographics that I work with. So on the small side, it would be crafts. Like I brought some show and tell crafts, like a little Appa, the air bison from Avatar: The Last Airbender, like bookmark, or like a little Nook pin from Animal Crossing. But on the large side, our most successful program definitely is a Hogwarts open house event that we do every year. And that's something that I started when I was at the San Ysidro Library that I have brought with me to the Scripps Branch Library. And it is a blast.
Okay,
so much fun.
We have to go into that. Please give details.
Yeah, let me give you the quick rundown because basically what we do is it's an alternative to a back to school event. For the patrons here, we do it right at the beginning of the school year, and for one day we turn the library for just like a few hours, 3 to 4 hours, we turn the whole library into Hogwarts for the day. So we set up stations throughout the library and have guest professors teaching the different Hogwarts classes. So there'll be like a class for divination. There'll be a class for defense against the dark arts, different stuff like that. And each one will have a different activity. Sometimes they're crafts, sometimes they're like activities. And so basically it's something that we invite the whole community in for. We have had crazy big numbers every year. It's been wonderful. But the nice thing about it is because there's so many things to do, families just make their way through the library. And then when they leave, they take like a handful of projects with them. So it's super fun.
It's like a mini Comic-Con for Harry Potter. That's amazing.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's something that we could only do with support from staff, with being able to find passionate people who are willing to come and help, and support from our teen council. We have a teen council at the Scripps Branch Library, and they are all huge Harry Potter fans, and they have showed up to be our guest professors for a lot of those stations. I mean, one of them completely rocks it as the Sorting Hat every year. So, like that's something we could only do with help, and we're able to do it with help because people are so passionate about this. They have such a love for it that they're willing to show up. And this is something that we see new faces every year come into the library for. People say, I heard about your Hogwarts open house and I came to the library for the first time to check it out. And then they come back. So, we're able to retain a lot of those people. It's really great.
So sorry to rearrange this whole thing, but let's be superheroes and let's find a way to make that into like a virtual program since, on topic. So, just right off the bat, I'm hearing that you have, different representations for, the different houses at Harry Potter, Wizarding World. So, I mean, you can do a Zoom session, 4 squares, right? And then have maybe like a representative of each house, and make it.
Or Vanessa,
different role playing.
We had a escape room, a Harry Potter escape room on the teen Instagram recently. You could set something like that up to sort people into different houses. And then you can, take them to a video or something that says, hey, you made it into Ravenclaw, like welcome to the house. And, like has some sort of like Ravenclaw pin craft or something. Like you could, expand it out.
Yes, I love all of this.
All right, writing it down.
Harry Potter,
developing my plan.
But this could be like Star Wars and any other fandom related things. It doesn't have to be like Harry Potter.
Absolutely. You could do it with Pokemon if you wanted to. It's like you could do it for anything.
Oh my gosh, I have so many ideas right now.
Right.
But so little time. So one of the things that I've liked doing is highlighting fandom stuff on our Instagram. Like, for example, for Star Wars Day, we did a crap ton. That's not an official word, but we did a ton of different story times, different book talks, different crafts for all ages. We also did trivia, and that actually got us like 5 to 10 new followers just on that alone. So, and that was one of our most engaging days because there was just so much to do and to come back for. And I also liked to show off like my origami fails because I tried to follow along with some of the origami videos, and it is not the fault of the videographer. It was all my like uncoordinated hands. I just could not do it.
But it's hashtag relatable, so you know.
Yeah, there you go. So how much time do we have left? I guess speaking of program fails, what's your most hilarious program fail, and what have you learned from it? I would actually like to start because I, in my wisdom, when I was a children's librarian, had done a Ziploc finger painting craft. And I had done that with a group of older kids in one of the communities that I served. And it was great. Everybody loved it. They're like, this was so much fun. And so I decided, hey, let me bring that to story time at a different library where I worked. And so I did, but the story time was for preschoolers. And I didn't tape the bag for Ziploc finger painting closed. And so, as you can imagine, lots of little hands made their way into the paint and onto each other and their grown-ups. And I learned never to do that again.
Oh my gosh.
So it was like one of those things like, hey, not everything's gonna work the same way for each age group and each community. Everyone's gonna be a little bit different. So don't think that you can just bring one program from one place to another without having to, you know, figure out how to scale that back a little bit. So yeah. Giffen, program fail.
I don't have anything to that degree, but you just remind me of something that did happen. One time we were doing a squid dissection at my library with, and it was just in the community room, which is, separate from like the main building. But then we had a power outage, and that smell wafted on into the library. And all of a sudden I had, an entire library of patrons literally gagging because it smelled like the middle of the ocean in here. And that took a while because no ventilation was, happening. Luckily, light was out, so we could still see in here. But yeah, the ventilation was it was a fail.
Yeah, sometimes the worst programming fails are the things you can't anticipate and just radically change things for you. Our toughest one, or my toughest one, was an event. It was a seasonal event. So it was based around a holiday. It was an annual event. And it was one that I was new to the branch when we were doing this program. So I had, when I was planning it with the teen council, like I was looking at the numbers from the previous year, which were very modest. And I thought, well, we can definitely get more people than that. Like they only have 30 people. Like we can definitely get more than that. So I had anticipated like we might get between 40 and 60 people with maybe a max of 80. And we had well over 100 people show up for this event, like maybe even 150 people show up for this event. It got to a point where it was too hard to keep track of how many people were in the building. And so that was, there were some things that we could switch last minute to try to accommodate more people. But at the end of the day, a lot of things, like you plan very differently for a program for 60 people than 160 people. And so at the end of the day, we just kind of had to roll with what we had. And unfortunately, wasn't as pleasant of an experience as we usually have with our programs here at the library. But, you know, then it was something that moving forward, we were able to plan in the future better for those numbers and have contingency plans. Like, we hadn't even done signups for that event because we never had to before. So, you know, learning lesson.
Yes. Oh, man. I would not have wanted to be in your shoes. So I think that's all the time we have. So for those who thought this might be too long and they didn't listen, what would be the biggest takeaway that you would want people to have? The TLDL.
TLDL.
Yeah, go for it.
Don't be afraid to fail. Go for it and have fun. Most important thing I can say is just have fun, enjoy what you do.
Yeah, focus on the why more than the details of you know, the little steps along the way and the bumps in the road. Like, focus on why you did that program and those like core objectives of like, did anyone engage with it in a great way? Like, was anyone excited about it? Did people leave being like, oh, I want more programs like that? Like, those are wins, like regardless of whatever hiccups you hit along the way. So focus on those things.
And my biggest thing is just don't be afraid to try anything and everything. I mean, with the caveat that it's within your budget and like you're not going to get in trouble with your library system or school. But don't be afraid to try something new. Just because you haven't done it before doesn't mean that you can't do it now. Or just because you did it before and it didn't quite work doesn't mean that you can't pivot and try to fail again, but fail better until you succeed. So yeah, just go out there, have fun, try your best, do something new every day. So yeah, that's our advice to you. And
sounds good.
Yeah, we'll have some best practices for you in the description for this program.
Oh.
And happy programming, happy Comic-Con.
Yes.
Happy Comic-Con.